Welcome to Rebecca Sounds Reveille. Today on the show, I have an absolutely phenomenal guest with a background who's much like mine, sharing a passion for others and helping them to really succeed and move forward. He's a writer, an author, an inspirational speaker. He has a fantastic blog. He is the founder of Rick Amitin, which is our guest, Rick Amitin. He has also traveled so extensively as an evangelist, and he pastored for many years. Interestingly enough, he has also built a multi-million-dollar insurance business in the Los Angeles area before he started embarking on a journey of personal transformation. And that's what today's show is about, because we are in a position in the world where there's so many things that are being disconnected, and family is one of them. Rick is also an ordained minister. He is a certified behavioral analyst, from the Institute of Motivational Living, a licensed insurance agent, and even as importantly, a transformational life coach. So with that, today we're going to be talking about something, like I said, that is absolutely essential in reconnecting the family unit. And right now we're seeing a lot of disconnects. We're seeing relationships just not work out. We're seeing families be broken apart. And the ones that really ultimately suffer, not only from the time that the family unit breaks up, and those people may have had already had a portion of their life that they've been able to live, but the ones that really suffer lifelong are the ones that come into our world and they end up not having a parental figure, especially that of a father. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, fatherlessness. So I want to welcome my guest, Rick Amitin, to the show. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Rebecca.
I am absolutely enthralled with everything that you have going. But one of the things that you have right now that is out is a book. And I'd like you to share that with the audience, because that really is going to build a really big foundation with what we're talking about today.
Yeah, there were essentially three reasons why I wrote my book. The first one was to facilitate my own healing in my own life. And secondly, I have a grandson who has a father that's not involved in his life. And so I knew immediately that he was going to deal with the plight of fatherlessness. And so I wanted to create a pathway for him. And then thirdly, I wanted to make available to others a means of facilitating their own healing in dealing with an absent or missing father in their life. And when I started studying and researching this material, I didn't want to go down the line of a lot of numbers and statistics. I think there are a lot of places that information is readily available. I really wanted to address the nuts and bolts of how to deal with it all. And so I attempted to find the courage to be honest about what I had experienced in my private world, so that people would have reference points to identify with. And so I wrote my book from that perspective, leaving some of the warts in. I of course, didn't necessarily tell the worst about me, but I definitely put in there, some of the dysfunction that I was able to relate to not having a father and deal with that.
Well, I can only imagine the degree of challenge it is in your position to be forthcoming about a lot of things that happen, because there's some things that are not really pretty.
Yeah, absolutely. And shame is the white elephant in the room, and it's
Hmm.
something we all don't like to deal with and admit. That we live with a sense of shame. Um, but you really can't make progress if you don't deal with that. And we're more afraid, I think, of what people will say and what they think about us than we actually are about the effect it's having on us. And so when you really make up your mind that you want to move forward in your life, that you want the life that you are dreaming about, and one that you desire and think maybe isn't possible, you have to deal with that shame, because once that is put in proper perspective, you find a freedom and a liberty to move forward that you won't have otherwise.
That's very true. And fear is absolutely debilitating for some people. And
Right.
all of the what ifs and what can happen. And then when you face it, you find that it isn't nearly what you thought it was going to be like. And it's very amazing. But let's talk about some things in just the foundation of a family and why it's so important that parents stay together.
Well, for me, I think we get our first glimpse of God through our fathers.
Hmm.
And so when our fathers aren't there, um, or they are there but emotionally detached, maybe living in their own dysfunction, um, and we don't get a clear picture of what love, authority, direction, clarity, affirmation, and a sense of worthiness, we're going to spend the rest of our lives trying to find that.
That's very
And
true. And I just want to interject in trying to find that, there's a lot of unhealthy behaviors that end up coming with that because of where it's being sought out.
yeah, every road we go down is not going to lead us to a watering hole. And some of them are just dry, desert places. And we end up layering ourselves with more things that disappoint us and don't work and don't have desired results. And so I think it goes back to this core element of the role that a father plays in our lives.
Hmm.
So my father was gone. I met him only one time when I was 5. He showed up, made all kinds of wonderful promises. I had the best 2 hours of my little 5-year life. But he walked out the door, and I never saw or heard from him again.
Hmm.
And there was a certain uh, emotional brokenness that came with that, that
Yes.
that grew with me. And the corresponding 3 stepfathers that I had over the next 4 years didn't do anything to help correct, any of that. In
Hmm.
fact, in many ways, it compounded the issue and made it worse. And so I ended up launching out on my own at 15 years of age, and never really lived with my parents again, and had this constant search. And we want that feeling of belonging. And so when we don't have that, our heart goes on searches, and we try to find it.
Yes, and I also think that there is an issue with trust there. And when going into future relationships, there's always that apprehension that the other person can leave.
Yeah, I think that it stays in the back of your mind. And I said for many years I was going to write a book entitled "Going Away No More," and I was going to write it as soon as I stopped going away, because I just kept moving. And
Hmm.
I would work very hard to build things in my life, and then I would tear some of those things down subconsciously, because I anticipated that that was the end result anyway. It wasn't going to last. It wasn't going to work long term. And I talk a little bit in the book about living with a revolving door mentality. And so it's very hard to, to put the foundation in place and go deep and
Yes.
create roots because of that thinking that I had inside.
That's a self-protection mechanism, and many people do that when they are faced with the challenges such as yours. And so it's easier to sort of tear those things down yourself than it is to have somebody else do it, because then you're hurt even more.
Right. Right.
And
No,
and there's some sense of control you have by you being the one to do that, even if it's subconsciously. So that is really very interesting. And so how long did it take you to really recognize the challenges and the brokenness of what happened to you as a child?
well, I really hate to admit this. This is one of the hardest admissions, for me personally as a man to make, um, because it really shouldn't have taken as long as it did. And I had access to probably some remedies, but I couldn't grasp them. I couldn't get a hold of them and really make it work for me, because a missing dad transferred into a missing God for me. And so even though I was a ordained minister and was responsible in many ways for helping other people in their lives, at a very deep level, I didn't believe God was there for me the way that I needed him to be. I had no assurance of that, no sense of confidence of that. And so I was actually 52 years old when my grandson was born. And the 9 months of contemplating his arrival and thinking about his plight being so parallel to mine, I was angry. I was angry that a thing that was so destructive was showing up in my family as a continuation.
Yes.
And I was really determined to break that, to find some way to minimize the effect of fatherlessness. Even though I had gotten married and stayed married and raised children, I still had a lot of conflict. I still had a lot of stuff inside going on.
Sure.
And it really was not until I held that boy in the delivery room that I knew how God felt about me. As I poured my love onto him and did everything I could to give him a different beginning than I had, it was in that moment that I knew. And everything grew from there, and the book grew from there.
That is absolutely beautiful. How amazing.
Yeah, it was an amazing thing. Ordinarily, I think the mother is the first one that would hold the baby. And once Jaden was born and the nurse took him to, get him ready and clean him up, they were still dealing with her when she finished. And so I was there hovering over him, looking for every sound that would come from his mouth and, every movement that little body made. I was on a mission, and because of the fact that they were still attending to his mother, the nurse handed him to me, and I claimed that as divine design, because I took him, in my arms. I might get a little emotional here, but I took him in my arms, and I blessed that little boy every way that I knew. I used every word that I could to give him a red carpet reception. And I wanted him to feel my love.
Oh, that is
And
beautiful.
so that's when I realized, as I was loving him, that's when I knew where I stood and how God saw me and felt about me. In
Mm-hmm.
spite of shortcomings and missteps and what some would, certainly want to label as dysfunction and sin, I knew God's love in that moment like I had never known before. And it helped me because what natural fathers are supposed to do in helping connect you to the spiritual father happened for me as I was trying to help a newborn infant feel that connection. So I felt it for the first time really in all of my life in that moment.
Oh my goodness. This is just breathtaking. And it makes me wonder, Rick, if there is a way to convey that to men out there so that they can be in a position to stay in their family, be a father, stay in their child's life. And for those that are disconnected, can gain some footing in this particular area.
Well, that's exactly my mission. That's what that's what I'm here to do. That's what I'm trying to create. It's what I wrote about. Along with my book, I created a companion workbook so that you could actually work through some of the stuff,
Mm-hmm.
inside. Not only men, women feel it, the same way. It oftentimes plays out a little bit differently, but the
Sure.
effects are the same. And so, I'm working now to create an online platform and, shows like this and other things that I can do to create a safe place so that men can realize that their value is not really based on their function or dysfunction. Their
Mm-hmm.
value is inherent. Their
Yes,
profitability now has everything to do with working out, our mental, emotional, and spirituality.
I agree. And I have two thoughts on this. And the first is this is much needed. And this is something that I think really should resonate with men because there's very little sort of um, groups or books or those topics or teachings that are directed at men aside from just going to church or going to a parenting class or something like that, but really trying to build the foundation and be able to work through pain, which many people don't want to admit is there. And so you can also look at it as avoidance. And then the second thing is that a lot of times we don't realize that what we learn in the home is really kind of our boot camp for relationships. And so, unless someone takes a cognizant approach to changing and breaking the sort of cycle that has gone on for generations and making sure that things really have a strong foundation, we tend to repeat those same things in our own relationships. And so it continues down, for generations from that point as well. And so I think it's time for a change. I think that this is something that really needs to be addressed. And doing so, I also think that it will build so much more confidence and love that is necessary that in many aspects isn't there, even though it's not outwardly spoken.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the very incorrect instruction that we received as little boys, that big boys don't cry.
Right.
And so we learn to cry without tears, but we act out.
Mm-hmm.
We act out in ways that, you know, are self-destructive and bring harm, you know, to the people who are close to us and the people who try to love us, you know. And um, you know, I didn't know how to love a woman. I didn't know how to love my wife. I wanted a family desperately, but when I got one, I wasn't prepared to be the leader of that family or to do my part in leading that family. And
Mm-hmm.
so there was, you know, there was much to learn. And I think some of the mistakes I made oftentimes are severe enough to be destructive. And it
Yes.
certainly could have ruined my life. It could have ruined my marriage. It could have, I could be sitting in a very, you know, different place today. But through my pursuit and my desire to actually figure out what it means to be a man, I found answers, and I had to be honest and grow up in some areas, and I had to learn, you know, what it means to be a man, because I was steeped in hyper masculinity, which is, you know, very typical for a young man who comes from a broken home and ends up in the military and, you know, goes down that path. And so it was very easy for me just to fall into hyper masculinity, which was just another addiction, you know,
Interesting.
that we dealt with, you know.
Very interesting that your response to that was another addiction.
Well, it's what it is. I mean, we don't like to think of it, but in those terms, but that's really what it is. You know, brokenness becomes its own addiction. It becomes its own. I mean, it may seek many, you know, avenues of relief, but it's an addiction. You know, one of the strongest addictions in my life was approval, and
Mm-hmm.
it was driven because I didn't get it from my dad. And you know, some people will say, "Oh, you're only making excuses for poor behavior." Well, I don't think what we do is as nearly as important as why we're doing it. And
Yes.
unless you can figure out why you're doing it, you really can't make changes in your life. And so I was determined to figure out the why. You know,
Mm-hmm.
what's driving my thinking? What's driving my the way that I view the world? What's driving my philosophies? What's you know, what's my method? What's driving my method? You know, in the way that I live my life. What's my strategy?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the why for all of that? And so, because we're all doing these things, whether
Yes.
we can put them in categories of understanding or not, we're doing them. It's just the human plight. And so, when we are dealing with this area of fatherlessness, these are the actual core whys. These are the whys that we are thinking and feeling and acting the way
Mm-hmm.
we are.
In your opinion, do you have any idea why we're seeing such a high rate of fatherlessness in our society right now?
Well, I think, you know, I could be simplistic in my answer to that. I think it's you know, it's probably much more complex, because it has so many arteries and veins, you know, running through that heartbeat. Um, but ultimately, I think the disconnect that we are experiencing worldwide when it comes to matters of faith and spirituality is the root.
I have to
And
agree with you.
yeah.
Yes, I have to agree with you. And seeing all of the things that are happening on a larger scale and the acceptance of those things that are different than what biblically is something that we are being told to do. That's,
Yeah, unfortunately, I think religion has to bear its own responsibility for the way that it has misrepresented some things, and you know, I don't think it's always intentional, um, but shame is and fear are two very easy ways of manipulating people.
Yes,
And it's the wrong ingredients. It's the wrong formula. Love is what doesn't fail. And when you can understand the depth of unconditional love and where that originates, it gives you a very safe pool to swim in.
I have to agree with you. Would you take a moment and offer some guidance or some tips to the audience on what they can do to encourage the movement back into fatherhood?
Well, anytime you start talking about this, of course, you run the risk um, of drawing the fury of um, the feminine side in many sectors of
Okay.
it. Um, I don't think that men and fatherhood is any more valuable or needed than women and motherhood.
I
I just
agree.
I just think the roles are different, and I think that we were designed to bring different things to the table that
Mm-hmm.
the other might be able to subsidize, but they can't produce it. There's things women can do that I'm never going to be able to do,
Right.
and wouldn't try. Or now that I have the understanding that I do, I wouldn't want to dishonor them by thinking that I could fulfill what they were uniquely designed to do.
Right.
And so I think that fathers just simply need to accept the place of impact that they have, and if they can become aware of that, I think I've over the years in ministry, I spoke with a lot of mothers and wives who really wished that their men were doing more, that they had more involvement, that they would become more active, in raising the kids and mentoring the kids. And so I heard that complaint, a lot. And so I think along the way, with so much fatherlessness happening to men, I think men find themselves in places where they don't know what to do. Even
Mm-hmm.
if they want to do it, I mean, sometimes they're living in their own brokenness. They've got their own dysfunction. If they're shame based, they work very hard at never appearing to be wrong, and so they live with a lot of secrets, and the secrets make them sick and make them more dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
And it begins to bubble up over time until eventually, very destructive things are in play. And so I think men have to realize that when you have children, you're in a position that only you can fulfill. And
Yes.
if you will accept that and become honest, you'll find the courage and the authenticity to find the answers to the questions.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, when I was writing, one of the things that became so apparent in my own healing wasn't just the answers that I found. It was the questions that formed. Questions that I
Interesting.
couldn't really ever, completely put together. And so as those questions became clear in my mind, the answers became so apparent. And then I realized answers were never hiding in the first place. I was just asking the wrong questions.
Oh, very interesting.
And
That
so
is very interesting.
when you can find the questions, you can find the answers.
I absolutely love that. And I'd like you to share with the audience how they can connect with you, because you have a phenomenal blog, you have the book that's available, you do speaking, you have the background to help others and the passion to do so. And I think that not only with that, but the life experience where you can actually identify with people. And this is a huge connecting piece of the puzzle, because oftentimes people will want to talk with someone, but if they haven't really been through it in their own life, then there's no real empathy there, and there's no way to really identify, and people back away from that. And in this respect, I think you are so well-rounded and such the right person to be able to create a movement in bringing people back to fatherhood, men to fatherhood, that is so essential to what we are seeing right now. And I think that by doing so, it will help society as a whole, because there's going to be less violence, less anger, less shame, and a healthier relationship from parent to child that will then continue on. And I'm just absolutely amazed at everything that you're doing.
Well, thank you. You said some very nice things there, and I appreciate that very much. The first thing I would say to people is, get the book, read the book, because the story is there and it's laid out, and it's not going to mirror your story exactly, but I think that you will find many places of being able to relate to my experience, to the experiences that you may be having in your life. The workbook I'm giving away for free. So if they go to ifonlyihaddadad.com, they can get the workbook for free, and then read the book, and then you're able to actually go through the workbook and begin to put the pieces together, in your own life, and it will help you sort out some of these things that have just plagued your thinking, plagued your emotions, plagued your relationships.
Yes.
And so, I mean, there are answers, and there are help. When I write in my blog, I don't only write just about the subject of fatherlessness, although I think everything really is related to that. But I just deal with the everyday stuff of how to find your own satisfaction, your own power, your own pursuit of excellence, and encourage those things along, because we all want that. We all want to be loved. We all want to be accepted. We all want affirmation, and we want that sense of worthiness, and we need clarity in our lives. And I just think the pervasive confusion that is just everywhere in society is just out of control. And I think it all starts with individual responsibility. And so when we accept the fact that we have to look at our own lives as being the one who can take control and make changes that you really want to make, once you realize that you can do that, and then you begin to take steps to do it, and you begin to feel that empowerment, it's really a deep encouragement to keep you moving in the right direction.
I love it. I love it. And Rick, you're the author of If Only I Had a Dad. Where can we find your book?
It's on Amazon. You can find it there. It's at Barnes and Noble, so you can find it there.
Excellent. And your websites, ifonlyihaddadad.com, Rick Amitin, AMITIN.com, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And these are just phenomenal in what we're talking about today. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. I can't express how elated I am that you're addressing this need.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Anytime we're talking about this, it's a favorite subject of mine. And, I'm on a mission. I want to get the message out. I want people to know that you can come from the depths of despair and have a life that you really don't want to leave. And so it really can be within your reach if you'll just accept it. You know, it's there. And so thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome, and I absolutely love it. And for those of you watching, I know that this has been a heavy topic today, but so many of us in society have faced not having a parental figure, specifically a father. And this is really important in having the men in our society step up to taking the responsibility and accountability and developing a relationship with the child that they have. It is so important, as we've talked about here today. And for those, it doesn't matter what the age is when you come to a position to learn about why there has been a disconnect, whether it has been on the top side, your own father, or you as the parent and having a child. But there is now someone here who can help you uncover ways to become a better parent, a better person, and excel. And as he said, have a life you don't want to leave. So please make sure to share this information with your friends, family, colleagues, and get it out on social media. And let's address the problem that we're seeing in fatherlessness. Thank you so much for staying tuned today. This is Rebecca Sounds Reveille. We look forward to having you watch another episode.